Hello everybody, I'm Ramsis.
And I'm TheVespor.
And we're here to bring you a very special edition of Vesper's Retro Reviews. Today we're going to take a look back at breakout characters from television shows from the 1970s to the 1990s. Before we start our look back at breakout characters, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and of course, ring that bell. We'll be bringing you much more in retro-based content here on Vesper's Retro Reviews, and we hope you'll join us and spread the word.
Every comment, like, and subscription motivates us further to continue to bring you this retro-based content. So please take a moment to do so while you are here. The more comments that we get, the more we can shape our content to your likes. So please leave comments.
Thank you, everybody. So, what are breakout characters, you may be asking?
Breakout characters, I didn't think there were breakout characters in Breakout.
What? No, Faster, no. Interesting idea or crazy thoughts there. I don't know what you're talking about. Good times playing that on the old Atari 2600. Just brought back good memories there.
Wait. I know what you're talking about, Breakout. Isn't that like an escape room that we like to do when we go on vacation?
No, Vespor, we've done those many times before, and yes, they're a lot of fun, but that's not what the term's in regards to here, Vespor. Come on.
Well, maybe you're meaning disgruntled actors trying to get noticed and breaking through barriers, confining them in the aspects of their own TV shows.
No, Vespor, that's not it either. Look, it looks like I'm going to have to spell it out for you and the audience before you start to claim that's about destroying everything in the city next. A breakout character is a character in a television show. But the examples are our look at them, but they can be part of any type of fiction, actually. And they become more prominent, popular, discussed, and or imitated than was originally intended or expected, sometimes equaling or even overtaking the main character or characters in popularity of a show not originally created to be focused around them. So, prominent breakout characters may have frequent cameo appearances in the expanded franchise, or even get promoted to main character status in their own spin-off work.
For my reference and for the audience references, it's those characters that have catchphrases and become popular and the focal point of shows you watch. They were background or later added characters, but they became the popular ones or the reason that a show survived due to their rising popularity.
That's exactly right, Vespor. So today, on this very special edition of Vesper's Retro Reviews, we're going to discuss 7 characters from TV shows that were breakout characters and how they came to be, how they changed the show they were part of, and then some of our thoughts on what we thought of the character and their influence on the show and society in total. This will be fun, as we don't realize just how many times this has actually happened. You go to watch a TV show, and it's alright, nothing special. Been there, done that, and then, bam, they introduce a new character. Hey, this character's funny, or interesting, or unique. Yes, more of that character, please. The show's producers and directors and creators all realize we have something special here. Our show is struggling. Let's give more time to this character and try to save our show. And if it works, it's a breakout character. If it doesn't, it's just another forgotten show to add to the list of many failed attempts to create series in the past.
So basically, the television show character has to actually be successful and have a long run. Breakout characters aren't just like a few episodes. They have to have a long-standing influence and really be remembered and talked about when thinking of the show.
That's right, the 7 characters we are about to mention all had long runs, many appearing in many shows later on past their initial series, and are remembered today for being the big reason why the show was successful, not to mention not being intended to be the main draw of the show when it was originally conceived. I think we got it all explained now. So sit back, relax, and join us as we look at 7 breakout characters that we think are the greatest and had the biggest influence on their shows and TV in general.
And this will be in chronological order. We'll give our final ranking of all 7 at the end, putting them in order from our least favorite to our favorite at the end of this review.
Alright, so starting in the 1970s, here we go! Breakout character number 1 is J.J. Evans from Good Times. From 1974 to 1979, Jimmy Walker.
The character of J.J. Evans on Good Times, as portrayed by Jimmy Walker, is the perfect example of an early breakout character on a TV show that totally changed the look and feel of a show. It set the precedence to rework shows around prominent breakout characters when they are found, as they seem to add life and ratings to an otherwise struggling show.
Good Times is an interesting show in that it is a spin-off of another spin-off. A lot of these 70s shows of this nature were created by Norman Lear, and he started with All in the Family, which was then spun off into Mogh, who had a maid named Florida, portrayed by Esther Roll, and she was popular enough to warrant her own show, Good Times, where we took a look at the life of a poor and struggling black family living in Chicago. Florida is happily married to her husband James, portrayed by John Amos, and they have 3 kids together. 17-year-old JJ, daughter Thelma, who is 16, portrayed by Bernadette Stanis, and young Michael, who is 11, portrayed by Ralph Carter.
This show was supposed to be a topical and more serious look at the trials and tribulations of an African-American family struggling to survive in the slums of Chicago, but then we had a breakout character moment occur.
That's right, Jimmy Walker's character J.J. Evans started to become so popular that he became the focus of the entire show, and the storylines all started to focus around him and only him.
The J.J. Evans character had a popular catchphrase he was known for, and that catchphrase was, of course,
Dynamite!
It became so iconic that the director of the show, John Rich, wanted it said by Jimmy Walker in every single episode he appeared on from thereafter. And well, for the most part he did. And this started to change the feel and tone of the show. No longer was it about a lighthearted look at what struggling black families were experiencing. Now it was about what goofy things will JJ say or do this week to keep us amused for a while as other less interesting stuff goes on around him.
This led to problems with main stars and adult focal points on the show. John Amos and Esther Roll did not sign on for the show to become a goof or comedic look at young black males. But now the show became focused around the silly, goofy, and buffoonish behavior of JJ, and Esther Roll and John Amos made their thoughts very well known that the show had shifted into something else due to this breakaway character, and they were not happy about this at all.
Well, let's put it this way. A TV show has a message, and is important for messages sometimes. But it is also a business, and the ratings improved greatly when the show became about JJ, and less about the serious situations that the original format of the show was intended for. John Amos was ordered off the show due to his negative public comments about the new direction of the show.
That's right, and John Amos's character James was killed off after the 3rd season, and Esther Roll had reduced her prominence in the series, even taking a break entirely for its 5th season. The show was ranked 7th in the 2nd season, so they had a hit show here, and Jimmy Walker was definitely a main reason for its popularity. But it is interesting to note that the show's ratings suffered greatly when John Amos was removed from it, and never really recovered, only getting worse and worse each season until they finally had to cancel it in the 6th season, where it was in the bottom of the ratings at 91st. So sometimes breakaway characters are a great thing, but only when you have everyone involved on board with it to keep the show familiar and constant all the way through. And that's the background of the JJ character on the show. Now let's give our thoughts. And as always, Vespor, what's your thoughts on JJ from Good Times?
Well, to be truthful, the 2nd, 3rd season really was my favorite seasons of Good Times. I mean, I love JJ, but I also love John Amos. When he was breaking away and pulling ahead, that didn't mean that he needed to leave everybody else in the dust, and then later on it just became something else entirely. So I truly believe and understand what John Amos and Esther Roll were talking about. And the reason I believe that JJ pulled ahead in the show is because the show was still getting a little too serious, and they needed that lightheartedness. Nobody wants to watch a show about pain and suffering without some levity to lighten it up, and that's why he became so popular. But without the serious side of it, it's now just a comedic show, and it's lost all purpose for what it was designed for originally.
I agree. I think they went a little too far. I think JJ is one of the first real breakaway characters where a show was created to be something totally different. It's supposed to be a serious look at African American life in the 70s, struggling in the slums of Chicago. And then it became a comedy show with this great entertainer of Jimmy Walker, who is a great talent. I have nothing bad to say about Jimmy Walker, one of my favorites. He's comedic, he's funny, great timing, great personality, great look, great everything. But to turn the whole show into him, I don't think they got the idea. Remember, this is one of the earlier breakaway characters, so they didn't understand that you have to focus on him, but still remember the rest of the ensemble cast is just as important. I think they lost that focus, because the show definitely got worse and worse every year. And I understand why the main actors were upset. This was a serious thing, and they're turning African-American male into a buffoon, and they didn't like that. The audience loved it, but that's another subject for another day. I think that describes JJ very well. Fun character, fun show, and let's move on to number 2. Alright, so continuing on in the 1970s and into the 1980s, we have another character. We have our number 2 breakaway character, which is
Arthur Fonzarelli, or as everyone calls him, the Fonz, or Fonzie. And this is from Happy Days, 1974 to 1984, Henry Winkler.
That's right. Fonzie is another example of a breakaway character that became the entire focus of a series that was originally intended to be something else entirely when it was first conceived. Happy Days was a pilot done during another series, Love American Style, and turned into its own series thereafter. The new series starred Ron Howard as young innocent teenager Richie Cunningham, and his best friend, dopey but well-meaning teenager Patsy Weber, portrayed by Anson Williams. Richie had two parents, his father, Howard, portrayed by Tom Bosley, and mother, Marion, portrayed by Marion Ross. He had a younger sister who was a minor character at the start of the series, Joni, portrayed by Erin Moran, and thus you had a new series about life in the 1950s as through the eyes of Richie and his best friend as they struggle as teenagers growing up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, as they go to school and hang out with their friends at the local drive-in eatery known as Arnold's. The show was not a ratings hit in the first two seasons, barely holding on in its second season with a 49 rating. Something had to be done to try and save the show, and thus, our breakout character was born.
While Richie and Potsy were hanging out at Arnold's, other friends would be there. Ralph Mouth, played by Don Most, who was another one of their goofy friends, would tell jokes and get into trouble with them often, and more importantly, they had the cool greaser, motorbike riding, high school dropout, leather jacket wearing Fonzie. He was the cool guy, the one who everyone went to for advice. He was just a very minor character that showed up once in a while in the background for the first two seasons when our two main teenage focal points needed some advice or another view on things as he sat on his motorcycle to help them from a more mature or cooler perspective, as it were.
Again, TV shows are in the business of making money and getting ratings, while a message of doing right and struggling as a kid in Milwaukee and look back at the 50s are great. The show is not going to survive much longer if a new idea wasn't formed here to save the show. The fans really loved this Fonzie character. He was just so cool and your stereotypical greaser character that we'd seen before in other movies and shows based around 1950s life. And we're going to now rework the show with Henry Winkler's Fonzie character becoming a co-star with Richie and his friends as well. It was risky, but to save the show, they tried it.
The show for its third season was now more of a sitcom, no longer really focusing on the fact that they were in the 1950s, which they still were. You wouldn't know from everyone now wearing 70s hairstyles and clothing all the while, and Fonzie moving into the Cunningham household, and was now becoming the focus of many episode storylines. They upgraded the character greatly, giving him catchphrases.
Sit on it, Marvin.
When he wanted to tell someone off, of his saying when he approved something of
Hey.
or when he didn't like something, he would say,
Whoa.
And they gave him superpowers. Yes, they gave the character the ability to do things that no one else could because he's that cool. He would snap his fingers and girls would run over to him wanting to date him. He could turn on or off any electrical device with a mere bang of his fist near it. The popularity of Fonzie, the rest of the cast started to become less prominent and less focused on, as all the stories now with Richie and friends somehow led back to a situation that was centered around Fonzie.
But unlike the cast members of Good Times that were upset with the breakout character taking over the show, the cast of Happy Days were happy that this saved their show and let it go on for many, many years. As this worked perfectly, the ratings exploded after they made these changes to the series, becoming more of a traditional sitcom and focusing on Fonzie, topping the ratings from 1976 to 79 and being a stable series until it finally came to an end in 1984, with the show having a very different look and feel by that time, with Richie and Ralph having long left the show.
In the final seasons, we have Fonzie now as a teacher, and Joni and her boyfriend, cousin of Fonzie, named Chachi, played by Scott Baio, become focal points of the series as it continued on. The situations became more and more pronounced and over the top, involving Fonzie as the series went on, even creating the term jump the shark for when a show gets long in the tooth and is no longer as good as it once was. The term created by the trilogy of episodes called Hollywood, where on a dare, Fonzie is wearing his leather jacket and jumps over a shark tank in the ocean while on water skis. It's pretty safe to say that without Fonzie and the changes he brought to the show, Happy Days would have been a distant memory after 2 seasons. And now, with that history out of the way, let's give our feelings on what we thought about Fonzie and what he brought to the show and his character in total. Vespor, what are your thoughts? Have at it.
Oh, absolutely. Without the Fonzie, this show would to me have been unwatchable because I honestly did not like the first couple of seasons of Happy Days. It only was when they focused on Fonzie that I got interested because I like more comedic things. And the first 2 seasons was more of a drama than a comedy. The example of the jumping the shark moment in Happy Days sets it for all other sitcoms, everything else after that. And if you watch those episodes, and if you specifically remember them, you would realize, yeah, this is really bad. And jumping the shark since then has become to mean what everybody takes it as because of these episodes. Overall, I give the Fonzies a 2 thumbs up and an A.
Well, I loved Fonzie. Happy Days really was a boring show. I mean, we've all seen the episodes in reruns. We know what the first 2 seasons were. It was kind of like a Wonder Years before there was Wonder Years type of show, where The two of them got into all sorts of situations, and it was kind of boring, kind of white bread, stale. Without Fonzie, the show had zero chance of surviving if they were not going to remix it. And it's a different show, but you know something? It's a fun show, and there's nothing wrong with having fun. Fonzie brought this weird fantasy element to it. There was no one more popular than Henry Winkler at this time while the show was going on. He was Happy Days, and he was even so gracious. He did not want his name above Ron Howard in the credits because he knew that that was overstating it. He realized that you need the rest of the characters, so that was very smart of Henry Winkler. All the cast members were on board with it because it's like, hey, we're going to have a long-running show here by just riding his coattails. Why not? That's the right attitude to have because it's really supposed to be for the fans. That's supposed to be for the actors who want to give messages and stuff. This is for the fans, and there's no one bigger or cooler or greater than Fonzie. Let's see what happens because we're moving on to the next one.
Now, we are going into the 1980s, and this breakout character is the 80s personified, as I think you will agree after we go to the breakout character number 3, which is...
Alex P. Keaton from Family Ties from 1982 to 1989. Michael J. Fox.
And here we have another show that started out as one thing, but became something else due to the focus becoming around a breakaway character. And in this case, it wasn't a character that was brought into the cast, but one of the kids who was always there, but not intended to become the main draw to the series.
Family Ties is a very 1980s-centric show. It takes place in Columbus, Ohio, with two parents who were hippies in the 60s now raising a family of their own. We have father, Stephen Keaton, portrayed by Michael Gross, who works for the local PBS station as its manager, and his wife, Elise, portrayed by Meredith Baxter Burney, who is a mother of 3 and a successful architect in her own right, as they try to raise their kids with similar values as what they had growing up, of being liberal-minded and accepting of the world, but having to deal with the more conservative and more corporate and business-minded nature that the early 80s were starting to bring us.
Their 3 kids consisted of the oldest teenager, Alex P. Keaton, who was conservative, wanted to make money and idolized the Republican Party much to his parents' chagrin. Middle child, daughter Mallory, portrayed by Justine Bateman, and she was your typical 80s girl who was a materialist, scatterbrained, and had no real ambitions in life but to be popular, become a fashion designer, and to date and one day hopefully marry a thug named Nick who her parents didn't approve of. And then their youngest daughter, Jennifer, who was a tomboy and enjoyed sports and getting her hands dirty and seemed to be much more level-headed than her 2 other siblings. The family would increase later on when another child was added to the cast. Andy, who was portrayed as a toddler by Brian Bonsall, and he would later become the focus of Alex in the series as they formed a bond together.
The show started out focusing on situations that were what typical families and kids of the time period were dealing with. Relatives often visiting, both with bad news or severe problems that had to be dealt with. The children having to deal with popularity at school, or sex, and buying a gun to protect their home, and how big a decision it is. Or one of Mallory's friends is now pregnant. Alex quitting a job he liked to get one that made more money, but doesn't like it as much as the previous job. Things like that. It was an interesting look at the kids of a very liberal set of parents and all that their liberal-minded views can get them into.
But then we had a breakout character, and in this case it was the oldest son, Alex, who after 2 seasons had become the stereotypical and template for what the perfect conservative should aspire to be like. The character was intended to be a spoof or parody of a Republican with the idea of Alex being raised by these very liberal parents and becoming pretty much the exact opposite of what they had hoped for. Alex would idolize former President Richard Nixon and often sing his praises and would love Ronald Reagan and his Reaganomics and pretty much toe the Republican Party line, much to the laughter and thrills of the audience as everyone reacted to his over-the-top antics in all things conservatism. Well, it worked. Too well. People only wanted to see Alex's character talking of all things Republican Party and business and money-making minded.
The show had to become more focused on Alex. That's what people were watching it for now. The change was subtle at first. A few of the moments were focused on Alex, but then go on to the storyline for the episode with the subplot worked in. Then suddenly around the 4th season, more and more of the storylines and focus were around Alex's character. And this was also due to his great acting ability, as this is Michael J. Fox, who was becoming a very popular movie star in his own right at this time. A fact that the series creator realized and were exploiting greatly whenever they could.
This is not to say that other characters didn't get time and focus during the series, as every single character did get their moments here and had episodes devoted to them. But somehow, Alex was more focused on, and in those situations, working him into the plot lines when possible so we can enjoy his over-the-top conservative behavior again and again. And it worked. The show was in the top 5 ratings for 3 seasons and went on for a 7-season run due to Alex's character becoming a main focus in the series. and the parents becoming less and less prominent to the storylines as was originally intended.
Alex would have a lot of growth in the series, dating various women, and even cheating on one for another, and working at his college as a teaching assistant for the economics class, and eventually winds up living his dream by working on Wall Street by series' end. It only got more intense by the time they added the younger brother, Andy, who Alex would spend most of the episodes now shaping and molding into another future young Republican like he was. The cast members were more than fine with the changes made to the show, as it helped give new life to the struggling series, and each of the actors had more than enough time to shine anyway. They too appreciated and accepted the popularity and acting prowess of the breakout star Michael J. Fox, and the show now lives in history as an interesting look back at the 1980s through various political perspectives through the various characters, with Alex's character giving a very pro-conservative outlook on life to counterpoint those of the hippies who raised him and would prefer a more progressive and liberal mindset. All done with a lot of laughs mixed into the sometimes overly serious nature of the storylines during the series.
So, without further ado, it's time for me and Ramses to give our thoughts, and since I am the star of this show, I'll go ahead and start with the fact that this show, more so now than then, is needed. This was a great look at life. Two different ideologies, same family, but how you could develop them, and how you learn to live with each other in these different views. You still loved each other, you were still a family, you may have some eccentricities, but you know what? You got over them, and life moved on. And I truly do agree that Alex's character was definitely, to me, one of the things that I loved the most. And that was just because it was such a great counterpoint to everything else going on. Plus, it was Michael J. Fox, and it really did get better with him there. But the problem is, the other characters really did grow on you, and when Alex became more of a focus, to be fair, it wasn't that much of a loss of screen time. It was just as things were. The more popular character is always going to shine. Like me.
Hence the term breakout character, exactly. So, I'm a big Michael J. Fox fan, so when he got the focus on the show, I was very happy. And I loved Family Ties. I watched from the beginning all the way to the end. I've probably seen every episode. Every show has these liberal mindsets, and I'm not political at all. I'm not, we don't do politics here, but it was such a interesting counter viewpoint. Like, you don't get to see that on TV. Oh, someone having a different view on things, and it's funny. Oh, wow, he's so over the top, but he really means what he says. It's like he would have the Wall Street Journal in his hand. He'd be watching, the Money Network while all the stocks are coming through. It was just very entertaining watching someone have a totally conservative mindset while living with a very liberal and Democrat family. It was very interesting, and I can see why they decided this is going to be the focus of the show. And yes, we were laughing at him, not with him. That was the idea, because he's just so over the top, so silly, that you had to laugh. But it was also something that really wasn't done. You always had it from one perspective on TV shows, and now they had Michael J. Fox, one of my favorite actors, doing the other perspective and doing it so professionally and seriously, yet the audience is laughing all the time as he's doing these crazy things all in the name of conservatism. But I am glad that all the other characters still got to shine. You had Mallory dating Nick. That was a very big storyline. You had Jennifer coming into her own. Many stories on with her. It was really the parents that got phased out, but, that's all right. Mostly a younger audience watching the show anyway, so we don't care about the parents. We care about what's going to happen to the kids. That's just the way it is. So yeah, great show, great character, but we got to move on.
So, now, moving from the 80s into the 90s with this long-running show and spin-off that this character would be involved with for even longer than his original run, our number 4 breakout character is the one, the only,
Dr. Frasier Crane from Cheers, 1984 to 1993, portrayed by Kelsey Grammer.
This is an interesting one because the Frasier character would go on to have one of the longest running existences on television.
In the 3rd season of Cheers, a new character was introduced as a short-lived and few spot-on appearance character to play up on the main characters of Cheers at the time. That being Sam Malone, owner of Cheers Bar in Boston, Massachusetts, portrayed by the one and only Ted Danson, and his love interest, one of his bartenders, the stuck-up and snooty, yet still lovable, Diane Chambers, played by Shelley Long. The bar would have many regular patrons that would show up weekly and make up the show's cast. Know-it-all and trivia-centric, unlovable, and quite annoying Cliff Clavin, as played by John Ratzenberger. And the other regular being Norm Peterson, who is always in between jobs and dealing with relationship problems, but is always greeted in the bar with everyone shouting his name as he entered.
Hey, what's happening, Norm?
Well, it's a dog-eat-dog world, Sammy, and I'm wearing milk-bone underwear.
Cheers has a few workers who were regulars during Frasier's time there. Main bartender is Woody Boyd as the dopey and well-meaning, but scatterbrained young man played by Woody Harrelson. And head barmaid, the wise, cracking, take no nonsense, mini kids, and a rough and tough attitude. Carl Tortelli, portrayed by Rhea Perlman. And joining the cast later on would be Rebecca Howe, who is the manager for Cheers after a company buys out the place, played by Chrissy Alley, and Frasier's wife, Lilith Sternin, portrayed by B.B. Newirth.
He was brought into the third season, which was 1984, and Frasier played two roles for the main stars of the show. He was Sam's psychologist, helping him with a relapse into drinking that he was having, and he was the fiancé to Diane, who Sam had just broken up with prior, and that added a whole new dynamic to the show and their relationship. Of course, as per the humor of Cheers, Diane and Frasier never tie the knot, and it's more disaster in the air due to all things related to Diane and her seeming to break the hearts of many a man time and time again.
Frasier is still very minor in usage here for most of the third season, and continues to show up well into the fourth season, still as a minor character, now depressed as he gave up everything for Diane and starts to frequent the bar as a regular customer, getting more and more screen time as the fourth season continues building in his popularity and breakout character status. It is in 1986 where they give Frasier a new love interest that his character starts to really take off. Enter Lilith, who is an overly serious, icy cold reception, but overly intelligent and fellow psychologist that Frasier has to have.
They eventually get married during the series run and have a son together, Frederick. And most of the situations now involving the Frasier character will be about marital situations and problems he's having with her as they're sleeping around and prior marriages all becoming big story focal points. But the character has now become a staple of Cheers, and even becoming the draw to the show, with everyone wanting to see what this neurotic and overly serious and pretentious Frasier will say and do next. He never actually replaced the popularity of characters such as Sam or Diane or Rebecca later on, but it became a star in his own right, easily surpassing the original bit part role that he has on the show to becoming one of the stars of the show by the time it was over.
Of course, even after Cheers ended in 1993, the show was far from over for Frasier, who would show up again in his own series titled Frasier, where he would be reunited with his brother Niles and Father Martin in Seattle, Washington, and go on to host his Theory radio program there. Now newly divorced with his wife Lilith in Boston with their son Frederick, he had to restart his life where he grew up once more.
And this spin-off would go on for many years, lasting well into 2004, with talks of another series to revive the character again in the works. So yeah, this was a very big breakout character that had more than 20 years on screen. He may not be everyone's favorite, but he's exactly what a breakout character is. Created to be something to play off of for other characters, Sam and Diane, and then going on to be around for 20 years after that. Not bad at all. But that's the background on the Frasier character. Star of the show, Vespor, what's your opinions on the Frasier character?
I absolutely loved Kelsey Grammer as Frasier. He did an excellent job. Frasier came off as just exactly what we described here. He's snooty, he's stuck up, he's a know-it-all. But you know what? He does it in the exact right way, because if you look at most of the characters in Cheers, they're so laid back, you need basically the straight man, which is what he was trying to be at the time, and that's why he was so funny, because you could add in the smart quip and make something that would normally not be funny hilarious. And it really did breathe a breath of fresh air into the show. However, Cheers definitely was not one of my favorite shows back then. But I watched it, and I did enjoy the Frasier character, and I really did like him in Frasier. But with all things, you can always have a little too much of a good thing. And after a few seasons of Frasier, I sort of just fell out of love with the character, but I still love Kelsey Grammer and what he did there, because my favorite movie to him in it is still and always will be Down Periscope.
You know, I was a big fan of Cheers growing up. I won't say it's my favorite show, and I won't say I have it on DVD. I don't, and I won't say I don't watch it unless it's on rerun somewhere. But I was a big fan of Cheers when it was on. I watched every episode. I think everybody did. You had to watch Cheers just because it was the show at that time. And I thought the addition of the Frasier character was brilliant. You know, you have all these stuffy characters like Diane, and you have Sam, who used to be a ball player, and then you have, you know, the people in the bar all being goofy stuff. He added that serious, just different perspective. He was the straight man, as Vespor said. But he had no one that had a different perspective on anything, and Frasier brought that. He was the too good for the room, the snooty, the uptight. I'm the PhD, I'm the doctor. And I know psychologists who act like this, so this is not really that far from the truth. Psychologists do act like this. Doctors act like this, pretentious, and they're I know everything. And he's in a slum bar in the middle of like downtown Boston, and now he's like trying to show all these ingrates like how it's done. It was such a brilliant way to have the personalities all playing off each other. I think Vesper's right. It went a little long in the tooth. I mean, who knew that this character was going to be with us for 20 years and not go away, and they're probably going to bring him back again, knowing how reboots work. I mean, enough of a good thing, but this is a breakout character. This character was not meant to do anything more than to make the relationship of Diane and Sam more complicated. And then for him to keep coming back and becoming more popular the more they kept showing him, that was unforeseen. They had no idea that this was going to happen. And I don't want to say it saved the show, but I do want to say it added a new layer to the show that it didn't have otherwise. I think when they brought in the Rebecca character, played by Christy Alley, that was a nice addition, because she brought in a different perspective. But she became a very pathetic character also. Frasier, while he was not a nice guy and did a lot of horrible things, he always stayed true to character. He was always the same. You knew what you were going to get with him. But I will say that this is a perfect breakout character. This is exactly what we had in mind. The show only got better, and all the characters still had more than enough time. He just became part of the main ensemble, and he was the talk of the show also. People wanted to know, what will Frasier do next? Exactly what a breakout character is. Now let's move on with more 80s goodness. And this one is different type of character and take on things. A lot of things had to happen and fall correctly for this one background character to become the huge megastar he became after breaking out. As we travel to the late 80s into the mid 90s, this time we have our number 5 breakout character, and this is a good one. It's
Worf, son of Mogh, from Star Trek The Next Generation. Airing dates 1987 to 1994. Michael Dorn as Worf.
This one will be hard to believe that this all started out with a minor character getting a big boost on the show suddenly.
So, Star Trek was brought back to TV screens in syndication in the late 1980s as Star Trek The Next Generation, also known as TNG. And the world was never the same again. Originally, the show was an attempt to continue the themes and feelings of the original series, started only 80 years in the future, past the end of the original series taking place in the 24th century. Star Trek The Next Generation focused around a crew of space explorers who were part of Starfleet, an Earth-based entity that explored the galaxy seeking out new life forms and new civilizations, and getting into all sorts of situations as they dealt with aliens and dangerous situations they had to work their way out of. They are exploring the galaxy in a brand new, top-of-the-line, best of the starships that Starfleet has available, and will use the same name as the ship from the original series, only with a letter classifying it as a later version.
That ship? The Enterprise D. And a whole new cast was introduced to lead the new crew of the new version of Starfleet's starship Enterprise D, led by their captain, Jean-Luc Picard, who was portrayed by Patrick Stewart. His first officer, Commander William Riker, portrayed by Jonathan Frakes. The helmsman, who became chief engineer as the series progressed, Geordi LaForge, portrayed by, LeVar Burton, that one. The chief medical officer, Dr. Beverly Crusher, portrayed by Gates McFadden. Her human child, who would become a major player in many seasons to follow, Wesley, who would become our acting ensign in training as the show progresses. Their science officer, who is actually an android trying to act human. We have Lieutenant Commander Data, as played so brilliantly by Brent Spiner. Because every ship in the future needs a ship's counselor, and boy do we have one here. The half-human, half-Beta-Z mind-reading Deanna Troi, portrayed by Marina Sirtis. And then we had a character who didn't even make it through the full first season. The ship's security officer, the human female, who doesn't take nonsense from anyone, Tasha Yar, portrayed by Denise Crosby.
So, what about Worf? Well, there is a reason we saved Tasha Yar for last here in the list of staff members. Lieutenant Worf is a Klingon officer, the first of Starfleet, so it's a big deal. Unfortunately, his role in the early series was not big at all. He was a background character, doing random stuff on the bridge, but not really doing anything of great importance. The original idea of the character was to see how far we have come, that we have a Klingon serving on the Enterprise due to Starfleet and Klingon Empire getting along for so many years. That was until episode 23, Skin of Evil, where Tasha Yar is killed while they are on a away mission, as Denise Crosby was very unhappy being a part of the show and wanted out, and they obliged by killing her off and thus removing her character from the series. Meaning we need a new head of security. Look what we have here. We have a Klingon on the bridge who does absolutely nothing for the most part.
I'd like Lieutenant Worf to program onboard sensors to monitor all personnel. If we can catch the moment...
I'm sorry. Whom did you say?
Worf, Chief of Security. The Klingon.
He will make for a good head of security, and fans grew to love him as he became a fan favorite quickly.
If you didn't realize how big a deal this is and how minor a character Worf was, Michael Dorn wasn't even shown in the original promotional material showing the main cast of the series. Series creator Gene Roddenberry did not want to just use existing alien species as quick answers to fill in slots, but wanted to show that we've made peace with the Klingons, so there he was for that exact reason. He was never intended to be more than a background fodder character. But after Denise left the series, he was signed on and available, and it made for an easy fill-in. Little did they know, he would go on to become one of the most popular Star Trek characters ever appearing in more episodes and movies and moments than any other Star Trek character prior to.
Worf would get major storylines once he was thrust into the cast, as his family history, both his foster parents from Earth and his actual family on his homeworld, would get major play. He would introduce many traditions, history, and battle methods of Klingons to the home audience, showing many ceremonies that we had only heard about, and giving us insight to the once unknown species that were only shown as the enemy of the week on the original series. He has a son, Alexander, played by Brian Bosnell, the same kid that played Andy in Family Ties that we mentioned, and he would show up in many moments of the series.
The history of the Klingon planet would be heavily involved with Worf, as he was dishonored by the government due to covering up truths, and Worf had to take the fall for the good of his people, and constantly getting drawn into politics when involving this planet and its citizens.
As the series progressed, Worf would develop a relationship with ship counselor Troy that would lead to some interesting interactions and situations with the two trying to form a relationship, only for that to come to an end as the series concluded with Troy going back to her first love, Commander Riker.
After Next Generation ended, Worf would appear in all Next Generation movies, serving in the same exact role of ship security officer, and being a major player in all 4 movies that took place after the show was finally concluded in 1994. And then he would join the next Star Trek series that was on at the same time, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, about a space station near a wormhole between 2 warring worlds, Cardassia and Bajor. He would join the space station run by Starfleet as their Strategic Operations Officer, with a promotion to Lieutenant Commander under the leadership of Captain Benjamin Sisko.
He would go on to deal with the Klingon War against the Dominion, and be dishonored again and have to deal with Gowron, who he put into power now, as that power is being abused by the new leader of the Klingons. He would develop a new relationship with another crew member, Jadzia Dax, a Trill Station science officer, and survive on that series until its end, where after so many episodes and appearances, we finally had the end to a very long-lasting era.
Vespor, what's your thoughts on Worf, son of Mogh?
I don't necessarily think that he saved Next Generation. I think that he became one of the crew. He was elevated from nothing to something, which is definitely a breakout. And they focused on all the characters equally in Star Trek The Next Generation. Now, with Deep Space Nine and later on, that changed a little bit. But at the beginning, it was all about crew, an adventure, and he did quite well, and he was unique because, like I said before, he was the only real alien. And what I mean by that is he had on actual makeup that made him look like an alien, Diana Troy being half human, half Beta Z, and the only difference is that she can read minds, which is done off screen. I absolutely do love the Worf character. It is fun, but the problem with the Worf character was, as time went on, the character truly didn't evolve past Star Trek The Next Generation. After the last episode was over, Worf was Worf. They tried to give him a love interest. They were too afraid to give him a Klingon woman for whatever reason. But that was also supposed to be the fun of Star Trek. You're supposed to have other aliens, other civilizations. Overall, he was a very important character to the show. Not the most popular, but definitely worthy of being a breakout, since he did literally get his own storylines and managed to survive far longer than any other character from the original series.
Very true. I'm a fan of Worf. I don't know if he's my favorite. I love almost every character. I'm not going to get into which character I don't like, because I think they'll start mobs here. But I love this Next Generation. It's one of my favorite series. It probably still is my favorite Star Trek out of all the series I've ever made. Yeah, Worf was an interesting character, because if you watch original season 1, you don't realize how he's a nothing character. He really is just there to say, wow, there's a Klingon on the ship. That's it. And he signed on, and Denise Crosby, for whatever stupid reason, I know she's regretted it and whatever, backed out of the show. And Michael Dorn, every day, should be kissing the ground she walks on, because she gave him life here. I don't think any of this would have happened if Denise Crosby did not leave. It was such a good replacement, because Worf was one of the best security officers I think we've ever seen in the Star Trek series. He had such an interesting character. He taught us so much about Klingon lore. We got to look at the home life of them. We got to learn about the people. We got to learn about their traditions, their language, their customs, the way they run their government. I mean, without Worf, we wouldn't have learned any of this stuff. By Worf becoming a major character, we were now his eyes, because he had so many episodes focused on it. Every character, like Vespor said, had an episode focused on them. But when it was a Worf episode, it was Klingon in nature, he was going back to his planet, he was helping with politics, he was doing some ceremony, he was in another relationship. It was always some Klingon something going on and that's all Next Generation. Deep Space Nine is a mess in itself. We can get into that another day also. He's not more popular than Jean-Luc, he's not more popular than Riker, he's not more popular than Data, but he's on the same level. And that's amazing because he was nothing before that, and now he's exactly what you think. When you think Star Trek The Next Generation, Worf is going to come to a lot of people's mind. Oh yeah, the Klingon, he's great, I loved him. He had that stoic talk, that very serious nature. He definitely helped the show. I don't know if he saved it, but he was a welcome part, and I'm very happy that it happened. Now we're going to move on to number 6. Vespor, introduce him.
Well, I think this is a perfect, classic, bona fide example of what a breakout character is. This face, this laugh, this outfit comes to mind instantly. Time to head into the 1990s for this long-running series, all due to this man right here, who is, of course,
Stephen Urkel from Family Matters. Series ran from 1989 to 1998. Jaleel White.
This is probably one of the most well-known breakout characters for anyone who grew up in the 80s and thinks of a character who took over a show when they were pretty much originally intended for a throwaway one-show appearance.
Family Matters was a spin-off of another series on at the time, Perfect Strangers, where Harriet Winslow was an elevator operator at the newspaper that Perfect Strangers' main stars, Larry and Balky, worked for. Family Matters, in its original iteration, was supposed to be a show that focused on the lives of a middle-class African-American family living in the suburbs of Chicago. So very similar to Good Times, except Good Times had a lower-class family in Chicago. Now we have a middle-class African-American family living in Chicago. The family was led by the before-mentioned Harriet Winslow, who was portrayed by Jo Marie Keaton, and her jovial and police officer husband, Carl, portrayed by Reginald Bill Johnson, who you may remember from this scene in Die Hard.
Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Man, goddamn it, fingers ain't Welcome to the party, pal.
They have 3 children.
And these 3 kids are older son Eddie, portrayed by Darius McCrae, who is often getting into trouble with his friends, and their older daughter, Laura, portrayed by Kelly Williams, who is a typical girl in high school and the heart's desire for our breakout star we're going to be talking about in a little bit here. And we have younger daughter who would disappear suddenly, Judy, who was just sort of there until she wasn't, I guess is the best way to describe her. Living with the Winslows, we have other family members. Carl's mother, Estelle, played by Rosetta Lenore, who would often be the wisecracking and take no nonsense from anyone else type character. Harriet's sister, Rachel Crawford, who was portrayed by Thelma Hopkins and would often get into situations with her sister, but was also written out of the series halfway through as Thelma wanted to star in another series called Getting By. And Rachel had her own son, who was part of the cast and would appear during most of the series run, young Richie, who was portrayed by Brighton McClure.
So where does Steve Urkel come into all this? Well, good question, as this is an interesting creation of a breakout character. So, Jaleel White appeared in the first season of Family Matters, and the character is that of an overly nerdy, dorky, nasally sounding young kid who has the hots for Laura. She wants no part of him, and it's all silly and funny stuff that happens due to the overly nerdy behavior of Steve. Well, the audience loved it. I mean, they loved the character. The character was never intended to be the focal point of the show, and was just there for silly sight gags and to stir up situations. But it was just what the show needed.
After his popularity built up again after his quick appearances on the first season, he was brought back starting in the second season to be a regularly occurring character. And the show started to shift with the Steve Urkel character becoming more prominent and the focal point of each episode. The plot lines would often revolve around Steve Urkel and Carl Winslow getting stuck together in some situation, and Carl having to deal with all of Steve's bungling, nerdiness, and problem causing due to his inept abilities to stay out of trouble, with his troublemaking and clumsiness and well-meaning attitude to do right, only for it to explode on him and make the situation even worse. The situation would often have Carl yelling for Urkel to leave and throw him out, much to the sadness of Urkel, who means well and sees Carl as a father figure in a way.
Other situations have Urkel and the love of his life, Flora, who throughout the series can't stand him, loathes him, and rejects his every advance and movement on her. Many storylines will be about his desire to date her, and what he will do to go on a date with her and court her and win her over, much to the audience's delight.
Lastly, we have Urkel having to interact with the older brother, Eddie, making up many episode plot lines, with Eddie trying to get Urkel to do things he normally wouldn't get involved with, even breaking the law and causing harm to others due to Eddie's influence, often having us all learn a lesson from it and being the wiser afterwards.
And of course, he too had a catchphrase, as we are finding many of these breakout characters did. His catchphrase was,
"Did I do that?"
When something went wrong, it was usually due to Steve, and he tried to play innocently that he had nothing to do with it, when of course he did. He also had his signature laugh that became iconic to the Urkel character.
The show is not doing well in the ratings at all, and the change of focus to all things Steve Urkel related, honestly, it saved the show. Without him, the show would have lasted 1, maybe 2 seasons. The show is never a runaway hit in the ratings department. It was good enough, though, to be a good Friday night staple and had a steady viewership. All due to the Urkel-focused reworking of the show.
Many of the plot lines were now about Steve causing trouble for the entire family, and they had to deal with what he just caused for the bulk of the episode. And this wasn't just normal situations, it could be anything you could think of. A time machine, a size alteration device, becoming his alter ego Stefan, who was the exact opposite of his Steve persona, as someone who Laura had finally found an interest in, with Laura becoming rather infatuated with Stefan before finally deciding she'd rather have the regular Steve back and not the phony version of it.
He was a super genius who could pretty much invent or figure out anything with his brain power and knowledge. He was hated by everyone in school due to his nerdiness, but always won out in the end showing them up. And his connection and bond with the Winslows became stronger as the show went on, with him basically moving in with them and becoming like the child they never wanted.
So, how did the other actors take to the changes of the show becoming the Urkel show suddenly? Well, mixed results, I guess is the best way to put it. Jo Marie Payton, who was supposed to be the main focus show in its original iteration, was not happy that the show became the Urkel show, even wanting to be written out towards the end of the run, no longer having the energy to do this type of show after so many years of catering to one character's silliness time and time again.
The rest of the cast, though, were quite happy. It's a paycheck, it saved the show, and it was fun. Reginald VelJohnson didn't mind and had fun with it, and is actually glad that somebody loved the Urkel character, and again, he had fun doing it. He has no regrets at all about this. The Urkel character would become something of a pop culture phenomenon, having a cereal called Urkel-O was made, a talking doll, and his famous dance. Not too bad for a character that was intended to be a goof-up character. Alright, Vespor, that's our look back on one of the most famous breakout characters. Now, what's your thoughts? I'm sure you have a lot to say about Stephen Urkel from Family Matters.
Oh, I do. I absolutely loved this show when Urkel became the focus of it. The problem, as I said before, with a lot of these shows, they get too serious and they don't have enough comedy to lighten up the seriousness of it. So, look at Family Ties. They did it right. They knew from the beginning of what they needed to do. They just didn't expect the comedic portion of Michael J. Fox's character to become so popular. Same with this, but the problem with the Urkel character was it became even more popular than Michael J. Fox's character. Everybody wanted to see Urkel. They wanted to see the silliness. Now, I have a feeling that this was due because Full House was on at the time, and it was a much sillier show with just some lighthearted jokes thrown in to, make sure that it didn't get too serious. This one started out super serious and moved more towards the comedic spectrum at the end of it. But, just like Full House, there was always a good moral lesson at the end of each of these shows. And for me, it was a wonderful, family-friendly show that everybody should watch. Steve made it a lot more relatable because, everybody's a joker at one point in their life. This show made me laugh and taught me something about being a good person. And I love it for that.
I think the Urkel edition was great. I mean, how can you say otherwise? I used to watch Full House. It would be on right before this on the TGI Friday lineup on ABC, and then this show would follow right after it. The show was fine in its original iteration, but it's like, all right, we've already done this before. Yes, we understand, it's not easy, it's tough. Are we having fun or are we preaching? So that's the decision, again, that the show has to make. Are we going to be super serious and the show's going to fail? Or are we a TV show? We're here to entertain and have fun. They decided we're here to entertain and have fun, and boy, are we glad they did. The breakout of Steve Urkel turned the show into something that you had to see. What's Steve going to do next? What wacky thing is he going to cause? What situation is he going to get into? Is he going to do annoyance again? Is Carl going to yell at him again? Is Eddie going to get in trouble? Is Laura going to keep rejecting him? It's one of those breakout characters that you think of right away. What was a breakout character on a TV show? Urkel. Yeah, you think of it right away. Whenever you say the word breakout character, Urkel comes to mind because he is a breakout character. He was not intended to be anything more but to play up on a joke in a date episode with Laura in the first season. That was it. But the character was so loved, they brought him back again for a little sneak appearance, and people loved it. They kept on showing up, and they said, you know something? We got something here. This is what our show should be about. Yes, I understand not everyone's going to love that you changed a serious show into a comedy show. It's happened before. We even have some shows on here that turn from serious to comedy due to breakout characters. Happy days, and we have good times. We've already talked about shows that it's happened. It saves the show. Are you in the business of making a TV show? Or you're in the business of preaching. That's what you have to decide when you're doing a TV show. And I'm so glad they did this. I love Urkel. I love the phenomenon. I think it's great. All the power to him. Jaleel White is great. Yes, he's typecast. He'll always be remembered as Urkel, just as Henry Winkler will always be remembered as the Fonz. But you're remembered as an icon. You know, you are one of the few breakout characters that are remembered for who you are. It's not a bad thing. Thank you for bringing so much joy. Urkel was great. I have nothing bad to say about him. The show is great. It was funny. As a kid, I loved it. And yeah, that's it. No regrets here. Good job, Urkel. You're awesome. And last, but definitely not least, we have another staple of the 90s who also broke out from his small appearance on a very popular young adult show, and his character is still showing up on the later editions of the series to this day.
And we met him, well, for 20 minutes out of his 45-minute commitment.
Yes, it is our last selection on the countdown of breakout characters. Number 7, and it's a good one. The man who wore many different colors and the face of the franchise.
Tommy Oliver from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. 1993, Jason David Frank.
Our favorite. Yep, here he is again. This should be a fun one.
So, how could the Power Rangers have a breakout star? Well, it goes like this. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers debuted in the North American market in 1993, and it was based on an already existing Japanese market show known as Super Sentai. More specifically, Toyo Sentai Zyuranger, as the version of the Super Sentai that was used for this first season of Power Rangers. Saban bought the rights to this show, Super Sentai, but instead of just dubbing over everything and rebroadcasting it that way, they were going to fully Americanize the show. They would replace all live-action character moments with newly filmed footage with all American actors and create storylines out of the existing fight moments and monster situations that they can use from the Super Sentai show. And thus, Power Rangers was formed.
The original cast had 5 teenagers who were the Power Rangers of the series. And they were all teenagers with attitude, as they called them. The leader, Red Ranger, was Jason, and he was portrayed by Austin St. John. Trini was the Yellow Ranger, and she was portrayed by Thai Thrang. Dak was the Black Ranger, and he was portrayed by Walter Emmanuel Jones. Kimberly, the Pink Ranger, she was portrayed by Amy Jo Johnson. And we had the Blue Ranger, Billy, who was portrayed by David Yost. And these 5 were taking on the roles of the Rangers, who all appeared in the Zyuranger series, whose footage this is all based off of. So most of the episodes would have the typical teenage-based storylines with the 5 friends having to deal with the school situations, like homework, or helping out others, or sporting events they have to attend. And they have to deal with the goofball bullies, who are sort of friends too, sort of kinda, in the names of Bulk and Skull, portrayed by Paul Schreier and Jason Narvi, who would also have long-running stays on the shows throughout the years.
The Power Rangers were under the leadership of an alien being in the form of a head known as Zordon, who along with his robot assistant Alpha 5, would summon the Power Rangers when the evil Rita Repulsa would supersize some object or creation of hers to turn them into a giant monster for the Power Rangers to have to deal with. Of course, after they transform into their Power Rangers outfits, they have to fight some generic bad guys and then deal with the villain of the week at his regular size before becoming supersized. When they have to deal with their supersized opponents, they summon their Power Ranger Zords, which are dinosaur or extinct creatures from Earth that can transform into a giant robot known as the Megazord to battle out against those supersized enemy that they face. They defeat it, and back to the human storyline to wrap things up. Wash, rinse, and repeat, and that was Power Rangers episode by episode.
Pretty much, yes. Where does the Tommy character, played by our favorite again, Jason David Frank, come into all this? Being that Power Rangers follows the storyline of the show it's based on in footage and characters, midway through the first season, the show will introduce the evil Green Ranger to go up against the Power Rangers, as per the footage of the original series having a similar storyline. So we need a new human to take on the persona of this character, and enter Jason David Frank as Tommy, who's under Rita's mind control and summons the evil Dragon Zord to take on the Power Rangers and their Zords in various battles. The Power Rangers, after many episodes, are able to change Tommy into a good guy as he joins the Power Rangers with his Dragon Zord in fighting Rita to take her down by the end of the season.
A relationship between Tommy and Kimberly is formed during the run of the first season, building on Tommy's popularity and making him a fan favorite and creating his breakout star status.
The idea was for Saban to commission Toei in Japan, who created the Zyuranger series originally, to help them create some additional random footage for them to use, having Monster and Zord battle moment, so they can turn that into episodes.
And there was no more footage to use with the Green Ranger character, meaning he would have to leave the show as they prepared for a later season of Power Rangers.
That is, until a new Power Ranger character was created for this new version of Power Rangers that was being specifically made for them. Due to popular demand, Tommy was brought back as the White Power Ranger and had a new ability and Zord to use, the Tiger Zord, who would now fight with the Power Rangers and their new Thunder Zords. And the show just kept going and going. Tommy as the White Ranger, now as the leader of the team after the new Ranger cast members were brought in. And they continued to use their newly created footage and footage from other series of Super Sentai to have them as Ninja Rangers, and then in a movie based on the series, all the way to the end of the third season. No more old or newly created footage to use. That was it. The Power Rangers would have to start using future series of Super Sentai moving forward.
But since our breakaway character Tommy was so popular, he would be kept on to lead the future editions of Power Rangers, becoming the Red Ranger in the Power Rangers Zero, and Red Ranger in Power Rangers Turbo, only to finally leave during the Turbo season when he had had enough and it was time to move on past Power Rangers. But it was far from the last time we saw the character. In a one-shot appearance in 2002's Power Ranger Wild Force, he, along with every previously appearing Red Ranger, showed up again where Tommy once again became the Zeo Ranger to do battle. He was brought back as the mentor and Black Ranger in Power Rangers Dino Thunder in 2004. He would have guest appearances in Power Rangers Super Mega Force and Power Rangers Super Ninja Steel, as all previous Power Ranger forms due to a master morpher he now utilizes.
So yes, to say he was a breakout character in the series is quite the understatement. He continues to be the face of the franchise, constantly being referenced and appearing in many more seasons to follow after his original appearances end. And don't forget, he was supposed to be a one-and-done character who left the show after the Green Ranger footage was used up. Shows how fan support and the popularity of the character can help save and shape a series into what it would become. Vespor, let's have your final thoughts on character number 7, Tommy Oliver from the Power Rangers.
I think the reason that Jason David Franks and his portrayal as Tommy was so popular was because he had the machismo. He had the draw. The thing about Power Rangers, at least in the original one, was you got used to everybody else doing their same thing over and over again, and Tommy really brought, I guess you could say, a little bit more of an edginess to it. It made it a lot more exciting. And you know what? He did a great job in making the character what it is, and actually, I believe, helping make Power Rangers a success overall. It kept the seasons going at the beginning until it became its own thing. He was my favorite Power Ranger, bar none. I like the edginess, I like the seriousness, and I just like the whole badassery he brought to the Power Rangers. And because of that, he appealed to a lot of the guys out there. And he also appealed to the girls because he actually wasn't bad looking. If I were to look that good, I wouldn't be single right now.
Tommy was special. You know, I'm not the hugest Power Ranger fan. I think we talked about this during our convention video. He was a great character. You know, you have the boring, it's the same thing over and over with the 5 original Power Rangers doing the same thing. And then you introduce this new character. And I understand they're using existing footage, but still, it made for a great storyline. They had to work it into the show. And you have a great character in Tommy. He's different. He brings edginess. He's a fighter. He's brave. He's good looking. He's athletic. I mean, it's everything you want in a new character. And I don't think even they realized what they had here when they brought this character in. They're like, all right, we'll get something cool for, you know, the Green Ranger, and then that'll be the end of that. They didn't know it was going to become a whole phenomenon upon itself where everyone wanted more Tommy, more Tommy, more Tommy. And so much so that the other actors left the show. He became the leader. He pretty much pushed everyone out of the way. They created a whole new character for him. He kept going into every new series. Everyone else would leave around him, but one constant was always Tommy going through all the series until he finally was the one to say, nope, I'm done. Goodbye, everybody. He's the one that walked away. And they kept bringing him back again and again. In the Dino Thunder series, which me and Vespor watched a few years ago again, he was great. It was so cool to see him back. He was 10 years older, or maybe 15 years old at the time, but he was great. He was so much fun watching him in that Power Ranger.
However, he was a martial artist in the first series, and then he suddenly made the jump to become a doctor, which was kind of weird.
They make fun of that in the series itself, actually. Like, oh, you're a doctor now. Okay. He showed no aspiration to be a doctor, but hey, he's a doctor now, so there you go. Yeah, it was funny. I think Power Rangers lore is great, where they have to come up with stories to make everything make sense. And Jason David Frank might not have been the best experience we had at our convention, but he was great and did so much for the Power Rangers, and we should all be very appreciative that his character was created and that he helped keep Power Rangers alive. I don't watch it anymore. I'm too old now. I can't get into it. But when I was a kid, this was great stuff. I couldn't get enough of it. It was so different. It was so much fun. And we have to thank Jason David Frank for helping to keep it going. So that was our look back at 7 breakout characters that helped change the shows they broke out in.
Yes, there are many more characters that are breakout characters. We just picked 7 that we felt were of note to us growing up, and that we had a lot to say about.
I mean, there are many more just off the top of my head. Elmo from Sesame Street, J.R. Ewing from Dallas, even Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a breakout character. But these 7 that we just talked about, I think were really the ones of note that were from the shows we enjoyed, or of a very memorable note, as they are the definition of what a breakout character is. And as promised, here is our ranking of the 7 characters we just discussed, ranking them from our least favorite, or at least impact to our favorite and most impactful as far as breakout characters go. And as always, this is just our opinions, and you're welcome to disagree and give your own thoughts on how you would rank these. We're going to start with 7th, our least favorite, our least influential, and 7th place we're going to give to
Frasier Crane. Now, the reason for this is because even though his spin-off series was absolutely fantastic, we're talking about breakout characters. And he was a breakout character, but the problem was he didn't threaten or dominate the show. He added to it, but was still sort of kept from becoming more than just a regular character in the show.
He was literally brought on just to be a minor replacement, to be a foil between Diane and Sam, and that was it. They had no thought that this was going to turn into what it turned into, a 20-year run from a character, but he really did not replace the characters around him. I still think that Sam was the big draw of the show, Diane and Rebecca were the draws of the show, and even Cliff and Norm were the draw of the show. Frasier was definitely important, but I still think he's the least important or impactful out of the 7 we have for that reason. I think the run he had on Frasier is amazing, and for that alone, he deserves credit. But still, I think the other characters on the list are a little more influential.
And now, for our 6th place, we chose Tommy Oliver. And the reason that he's at 6th place is because when you watch the show originally, you think that everything is absolutely planned. You had no idea he was only supposed to be a temporary character. You thought this was all planned and that he was going to come back anyways, because who would dare get rid of such a popular character?
Right, you can't get rid of him. No. So, no, I agree with Vespor. That's exactly why he's number 6. Again, we love the Tommy Oliver character. Great addition. As a kid, you're thinking, oh, all right, that was the plan all along. That's what's supposed to happen. They brought him in. Now he's going to take over the Power Rangers. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes when you're watching this. It all feels like it's natural. This is exactly what the plan was all along. Little did we know that they got very lucky and that the Tommy popularity was so high, it really saved the series. I think the series wouldn't have lasted long. They wouldn't have had a movie if the Tommy phenomenon didn't help them. But still, all the characters shine. This was not just the Tommy show. He was the most popular. But I still think every Power Ranger was just as important, and that's why he's still not overly influential, but he's definitely a great breakout character that everyone will think of when you think of Power Rangers. Alright, so 5th place, we went with Alex P. Keaton from Family Ties. And it was tough between him and the 4th place, but I think you have to remember that Alex P. Keaton, Michael J. Fox's character, was always on the cast. It wasn't like he was just sort of thrown in there. He was there. You know, Michael J. Fox wasn't just in the background. He was one of the kids as part of the show. So that he became that popular is an assessment to how great an actor Michael J. Fox is and how unique the character was. The very conservative, very Republican, we're going to laugh and we're going to focus on this. That was out of nowhere. They did not expect this to turn into like, we want more Alex, we want more Alex, we want more Alex.
Oh, absolutely. And once again, the reason he's at 5th is because unlike the first 2, you could actually see him just suddenly become from I'm here to be coming to the front of the show and actually taking over a lot of every episode. That's how come you knew he was a breakout character. He never stood at the same position like most of the rest of the characters did. And eventually even the parents were lowered down in importance to give more time for Alex. So this is where you really start to get that feel that he's a breakout character and you can see it. However, since he was a kid and always in all of them, we didn't rate him nearly as high as some of the others.
Now our fourth place character is Worf, son of Mogh. And yeah, this is where we're getting down to the real breakout characters. Super popular, made the show into something else, taught us everything you could think about Klingon lore and history, one of the longest lasting Star Trek characters ever. I mean, think about that. A minor character was in the background and got into the show because Tasha Yar was killed off. I mean, really, think about this. Without that happening, who knows what this character would have became, if anything.
I mean, he only had like 1 or 2 lines per episode until she was gone, if that. Most time he just stood there looking at something and interacting with it.
Or something, or he typed some things.
He literally had nothing and then became something. And it was very integral to the series moving forward. It really was. Specifically because later on in the TNG, in the Next Generation, they deal a lot more with Klingons towards the end of the series. And that makes for great storylines.
Yeah, he reshaped the whole show. I don't think it was going to be focused on Klingons at all unless Worf became something. I really want to stress that to people. The Klingon history and heritage would not have happened if Worf did not become a major character as part of the series, because there would be no reason to. We were following through the eyes of Worf when it was a Worf episode. So thus, Klingon situations happened. We wouldn't have learned any of this stuff. And I think it's reshaped Star Trek into something it may never even be close to again. It really helped this series advance into something that they didn't think of.
And now, for our number 3, we have JJ Dynamite Evans. Now, the reason he's number 3 is because there's always been breakout stars and other things in shows before this. However, for like syndicated television, for primetime, this was the first time you literally see a show that's literally about to be canceled suddenly have a character that's so wildly popular, they literally abandon the original ideas to just follow this character and give him things to do. The reason he's at 3 is because his breakout popularity also killed the show and made people quit. He wasn't a great breakout character, he helped end the show.
Yeah, unfortunately, as great and as breakout as he is, and he deserves his number 3 ranking, he's one of those iconic breakout characters. All you think about when you see Jimmy Walker is JJ Dynamite Evans. I mean, that's all you think about when you see this guy. He was breakout. Now, the show, unfortunately, got worse when you just focus on him. So they didn't understand that you need to keep a chemistry and keep everything together while focusing more on him. See, other characters got it right, like Alex B. Keaton, they did that, and even Worf, they did that. But JJ is still a very big breakout character, one of the first, and you have to honor him for that. I mean, this started a phenomenon of breakout character syndrome where you had a minor character that was sort of there, and then you're going to rework everything to save a dying show around JJ, and that was exactly what it is. Good Times lasted a lot longer than it should have because they turned into JJ's show. So now for our silver medalist, we have our number 2 choice, and this is tough because 1 and 2 are just as big breakout stars, and you know who's left on the list. But we went with Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz. Very tough decision, but he is one of the best breakout characters you can imagine. It was dying, it was unwatched when you had the Richie and Patsy show. You turn it into the Fonzie show, and now it's the number 1 show on TV. So what does that tell you right there? Henry Winkler pretty much saved Happy Days. I mean, the show went on for like a long run and went on well past the Richie character was off the show, if that tells you anything. Fonzie is the coolest character you want to be with. You would love to meet someone like this. He personified what coolness and awesome and just like 50s was in a molded. It's so amazing what happened here. Because I think they had an idea that they had something special with him, but they could never in their wildest dreams imagine it was going to turn into what it did.
And the reason he's at number 2 is because he didn't take away from anything else. Yes, they did, like all breakout stars what we're thinking about, get focused on more, but they didn't write out anybody else, and they didn't quit or leave. They were not insulted by Harry Winkler, they were not insulted by the Fonz, and were happy because it gave them work. But that was also because they did the Fonz organically, until in later seasons where they jumped the shark, so proving once again they haven't quite yet figured out that whole how to handle a breakout star.
And now, but we have the gold medalist, the breakout star of all breakout stars, and I think you guys should agree with this one. When you think breakout, you're thinking of this character. There's no more breakout than this character. Stephen Q. Urkel from Family Matters. Let's have a round of applause for him. He is definitely the number 1 breakout character of all time, and I will stand by that.
And there's a reason for this. It is because, just like Happy Days, the show was dying. But however, when Steven Urkel came onto the scene in the second season, it changed the dynamics of the show and created characters so popular that you don't remember hardly any of the other cast except for Carl Winslow. And why is it Carl? It's because him and Steve were always off doing something
together. They were
together.
heads together for the whole entire time, yeah.
But the thing is that this breakout character didn't override the base idea of the show, giving you good morals and things to think about due to the actions in which they go through. It still did that. To me, I love Family Matters more because of Urkel and because they taught a much more, at least to me, organic experience.
Yeah, it was becoming to the point where they could do anything they wanted, and it worked. Hey, he's a super genius. Hey, he's the smartest guy ever. Hey, he's a nerd. He's a dork. He's a geek. Hey, we can do whatever we want. It's a comedy show. It's not supposed to be taken seriously as the original iteration of it was, and it worked. You know something? I can't think of any other show that changed so dramatically from what it was supposed to be. I mean, no one ever thought that the Urkel show would form out of 2 guest appearances early on in the first season, and then, oh, that's our guy. We're going to make the whole show out of this dork. He's going to be our new icon, and the show goes on for many, many more seasons, all because of that one change they made. It is amazing. That's what a breakout character is. Jaleel White will ever be typecast as this character, and I think he's happy about it. You know, something to be a 10-year hero to so many people, that brings so much joy to so many people, to be remembered as one of the best breakout characters ever. Hey, you know something? You did something right in life. That's not a bad thing. You know, that you did well. And I love Family Matters, and I love what Jaleel White brought to the show, and I stand by 100% that this is the best breakout character I think we've ever seen in TV show history. And that's it for our look back on breakout characters from TV shows. We hope you enjoyed our trip back into the past to see how influential some of these characters were in reshaping a show, and our culture for that matter, once they rose to popularity after their initial creation.
Breakout characters are that ace in the hole, a special magic card that you pull out when all else fails. Creation of these is not always easy and not usually intended, but it sure can save a series from certain fail and bring forth a character that will be loved and cherished forevermore when you look back on a franchise, remembering what you like so much about it. And also, need to reemphasize the fact that these breakout characters are great because nobody expected it. And you really can't write for a breakout character. If you're trying to write a breakout character, what do you get instead? A popular character, not a breakout.
Yeah, he said it very well. And that's it. That's our thoughts on these 7 breakout characters that we selected for our special edition of Vesper's Retro Reviews. We want to hear your thoughts on breakout characters, your favorites, your thoughts on our selections and opinions, and anything else you have to say here. It's such an interesting topic that I think we brought up here, worthy of a full review and in-depth look back on TV shows from our history. We don't realize how many times a show started as one thing and became something else to cater to a newfound star that they created on a series unexpectedly. Definitely interesting when you look back on it, which is what we're here to do. Look back at those old memories that you still enjoy to this day.
That's all for now. We will see you again next time.
Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and
ring that bell.
That's right. Take care, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.